Well, good afternoon, everybody, or not quite yet, but anyway, thank you for coming to this session. We're just starting just a few moments later than initially planned, but we will try to end at the usual scheduled time. My name is Vesna Belogaska. I'm director at Aris Connect, and I'm responsible for the overall strategic development, special focus on partnerships, international projects, and effective implementation of our services and resources within the expanding number of partner organizations that we work with. I have been privileged to be part of the Aris Connect story right from the beginning as a startup in 2008, and very happy to have been able to contribute to its development into the global PD organization that we are today. So the topic for today's workshop is sustainable collaborative PD with particular focus on lesson study. Before we start, can I just ask, how many people here have got experience with lesson study, whether being part of or at least have good understanding of that as a method? Okay, so a few. It will be probably new for most of you, so that's exciting. So we are going to be talking about sustainable collaborative PD, what it is, why it is important. We'll address some of the main enablers and barriers to it, and also how Aris Connect facilitates those key models of collaborative and sustainable PD. So to start with, I just chose this sort of definition in one of the research studies by the Institute of Education, University College London, in terms of what we mean by collaborative and sustained PD. And the definition refers to, obviously, shared learning and support between at least two teacher colleagues on a sustained basis. And the sustained basis in this particular example refers to a particular period of time, at least 12 weeks or one term, but that was for that particular project. It really refers to the fact that it needs time for the teachers to be able to embed it into practice and to actually see impact on it. And we will focus on some of the challenges when that is not necessarily in place. So the reason we are talking about the collaborative aspect of CPD, as it was mentioned in the introductory talk by Andy and the keynote by Sam, is because it's one of the elements that makes professional development effective. It's really important in order to be able to do that, because the impact both on the teacher professionalism and the effectiveness and students is pretty significant. So there is a body of research that points out to increased self-efficacy for teachers when they have the possibility to collaboratively work and develop, greater commitments to changing practice and also trying new things in the classroom, greater enthusiasm for collaborative working, even though there is often that kind of initial anxiety about being observed and about receiving feedback, but that's at the basis of developing that sort of effectiveness. There is also impact, obviously, on the students. So enhanced motivation and confidence has been noticed, increased participation and increased satisfaction with their work, improvements in their learning and performance, such as improved test results, in particular studies, enhanced reading fluency, etc., often better organization of their work and increased sophistication in response to their questions. So that is kind of to set the scene. What I would like to invite you to do now is have a little bit of a think, pair, share exercise. If you'd like to just pair up and have a discussion between yourselves for about 3 minutes in terms of what's your experience with collaborative professional development, and based on that, what would you say are the key enablers, but also challenges in order to be able to implement that? So I would just like you to move around a little bit and just select a partner, and we'll work in pairs. In about 3 minutes time, we can have a little feedback from yourselves. You'll be very welcome to share it with everyone. So in terms of collaborative professional development, we heard early on, obviously, various modalities about it, but the main things are activities that happen within that, which is the observation, reflection, shared planning, analysis, implementation, etc. So can we have feedback from each group that was, I think it was more than pairing, it was probably smaller groups as well, but perhaps just if you can summarize what are the key enablers and challenges from your perspective, and then I'll show you a list that I've prepared earlier and see how much of those things match or if there are certain things that we need to add to it. Shall we start from the back? Who would like to report on your discussion?
So a couple of the things that we said. So we talked about like culture within a school or trust, and that providing sort of understanding and a level of sort of buy-in, commitment that this is going to be something that's worthwhile spending your time on as an enabler. We'll balance become more challenges and barriers than we did enablers, but we talked about two specific ones. So just the logistics of it, just finding the time and managing the the frenetic environment of the school and not letting PD be the thing that just gets back to the bottom of the list is really, really difficult, I think. And also just the perceived relevance of what if you want, this tension around everybody committing to focusing on a particular aspect of their teaching practice, and then perception of how relevant that is for you as an individual, as at the point at which you are engaging in that professional development, that there can sometimes be a discrepancy between, I guess the level of relevance from one individual to another.
Thank you very much. Would someone else like to report your findings?
I mean, just to on what you said there, we talked about that and time being one of the barriers, but for example, in our school with 3 formentary, so we've got 3 colleagues per year group, and we make sure they've got their PPA together so that they can collaborate. But then the next barrier is, do they actually know how to collaborate with each other, or are they actually just filling up the time doing tasks and splitting up their, one person is planning the English, one person planning the maths, and they're going separate ways. And not actually, they're in the same room, but are they actually having those conversations so that, yes, they might be sharing out the workload, but in terms of their individual classes and teaching, are they actually collaborating on that maths plan together before it's set out? So it's, that, are we training adults, teachers to collaborate together? We do it lots with the children, but, are we assuming that adults are actually able or skilled enough to collaborate? And I'm not even going to say early career stage, because it just depends on individuals, doesn't it?
It's a valid point. I guess we're often more conscious of it when it comes to collaborative work for the students, but for the adults, the same sort of thing applies, really. Shall we just move around? Who is the next who would like to report on your conversation?
We were just talking about how, in my context anyway, that we did some instructional coaching that was brought in as a solution to performance management and kind of how to track your development as a teacher. And as a result of that, it became more of a tick box exercise because it was a solution to a problem rather than us focusing on how to effectively do instructional coaching and kind of develop ourselves as teachers, and then using that as a way of tracking improvement and performance management. So that's kind of how it fell down for us. And I think that's definitely a barrier for us at our school at the moment.
Yeah, it actually goes back to what was discussed in the sessions earlier, isn't it? There are all of these methods and tools that can be very effective, but it really needs to be in the right context at the right level, and the relevance that was discussed earlier. Thank you. I think you wanted to contribute at the back.
I think talking about conversation groups as well, and how you can sort of ensure that everyone is participating fully within it. And also looking at relevance as well. is absolutely really important. In our school, we've actually played with collaborative PD over quite a few years now. We think we've got it right now, but yes, we have things where the competition, we've had people working from across the school brought together, and we found that didn't really work. And now we've actually got it to the point where we've got people working within year groups. We've got the same ideas across the school, but everyone's working with it within their own year group, and they've actually chosen what they're looking at within the bigger unit, and it's something that they can actually see as having an impact on a daily basis. And I think, as you talk about relevance, is really important that they can really see the points for what they're doing.
Thank you. Actually, it is something that I had also touched on, as we will see in my summary, that sort of potential difference between the individual focus of a teacher in the classroom and the whole school, and in a culture where performativity seems to be really the focus for various reasons, that can be difficult to put together. But when there is a possibility to work like that and to establish it in the context of the whole school with the individual focus, obviously that is the most effective way of doing it. Right, would you like to share your...
Shall I see if I listen to David? I'll see how well I listen to you and you fill in. David's got a clear intentional initiative he's part of, a 2-year cycle where they have a team that buddy and they work on a theme. David's a geography teacher and he's focused for using it as mini whiteboards, and he worked with year 7. There's aspects we got onto that was interesting when the phrase it didn't work. So we were exploring that. One of the questions was, has he seen an exemplar of where a mini whiteboard had worked with a geography class? So very much.
Yeah. To add to that, very similar to what everybody's already said, it's about buy-in. So when it does work, everybody buys in. And the challenges are that it's when people don't value it, or if there's not enough time given to it, and it's just sort of an add-on, it's something else we need to do. But most people who sort of are on board, they value it, they can see the worth out of it, and they are self-reflective. And
that currency, time, and
with everything we need time.
Yes. Yeah, and embedding it in order to see the impact. Thank you. And that brings us to this group here. I think you were all discussing it together.
Well, David goes back into a very different way to my experiences, but I think the common thread that we've seen to come out was that the relationship between the people that are doing it is vital. David is doing it online, so it's very hard to build relationships between people when they're doing that. And I think from my perspective, it was that I work with a lot of ECTs, and so when they collaborate with someone else, they automatically see themselves as a novice and the other person's an expert, and so it becomes it's not an even balanced relationship in that sense. So I think that is quite an important thing. That can be a big barrier, but it can also have a huge enabling effect if you get the right people together. It can have a really positive effect.
I think just from like a more meta language, what was setting the right environment and having an environment which enables the people to be present in that environment and to be individually present and develop social presence.
Yes, and again, I think it goes back to the adaptability, because the different levels, that whether it's more directed or facilitative coaching, it really is important to do the right one for the teachers at the right level of experience. Well, thank you very much for your contribution, and I think I'm glad to say that I think most of those things are already included in some of the summaries that I gathered. I think there was one or two that were not necessarily as explicit, but some of the research points out that, again, in order for it to be effective, it's important to be classroom-based, and the learning teachers classroom-based, so that sort of authenticity to help them to really see the impact. Would you agree with that? In general, that it really needs to be to allow the teachers to have the feedback on what they're doing in their own environment. Again, we're going back to the different models and the value of all of them, you know, from rehearsing at a certain level of expertise to real feedback in the classroom. Time and resources, I think it's always very relevant and important. Opportunity to have that sort of reflection and experimentation, the feedback that is based on observation, and also emphasis on peer support rather than leadership by supervisors, again depending on the level of expertise and the level of and type support that is needing. Also potentially working in pairs or small groups can be more effective than larger discussion groups, depending again on the model. The teacher autonomy in identifying their own PD focus, again, very clear topic that came out of this morning's sessions, and that sort of notion of earned autonomy. So at what point teachers actually do have the skills and the knowledge and the confidence in order to identify that themselves. And processes for sustaining the PD over time. So one of the challenges is that sort of limitations of one-shot approaches, or even when it is the right approach, but when it's rushed in order to try and get the impact quicker. So there are a lot of studies that actually point out to that, you know, the need to allow the embedding of the practice in order to see the impact, and also the right sort of amount of it, almost like the Goldilocks situation, the right amount of directedness versus more dialogic or facilitative coaching, and certainly the time for embedding it. That reminds me of actually one of the recent research studies that we supported in the United States with the Mathematica project. They were experimenting with providing video-based teacher coaching, and it was one of the largest actually studies of that randomized control study. So interestingly, the results were that teachers who had 5 cycles of coaching during the academic year demonstrated the most impact on the learner outcomes actually when it comes to video-based coaching. The control group that didn't have video-based coaching and the group that had 8 cycles of coaching had the same sort of results, i.e. not much impact. So this is where, you know, finding the right amount and right proportion for the right processes. So as Andy demonstrated earlier on, in the work that we do in Iris Connect, we're really trying to use the technology and develop and design the technology that can allow us to get that sort of right amount and level of support to the right teachers. So I'm going to take this opportunity just to show you how we support certain types of collaborative learning through the frameworks that we have created, in particular coaching and the different levels of coaching that we provide, but also the possibility to customize it to the particular individuals, the particular schools. So this is our way to try and enable that sort of seems to be elusive, adaptive professional development at scale. Can I just ask also at this point, how many of you are familiar with Iris Connect in terms of having used it? Okay, right, so probably half and half. So I'm not going to go through everything. I will just focus on some of the frameworks that we've created, because just very briefly, for those who are not very familiar, we do have the elements that are kind of the starting point in the professional development journey in terms of finding out where you are at from the perspective of our tools being able to allow teachers to record their practice in order to identify a starting point, and then use the content that we provide as well as content that is being used in the schools themselves, and then use these sort of frameworks or scaffolding to help with that step-by-step implementation into the practice in the right context. So we do have these modules that we have created that are based on the higher leverage teaching strategies, or the ones that research shows have the most impact on the learner outcomes. So this is why we're starting with the behavior, instructional scaffolding, questioning, dialogue, oracy, assessment and feedback, and collaborative learning. So we have provided the summary of the latest theory into that strategy that is curated by our experts, educational experts in our organization, but really we have summarized the research by the experts in those fields. And the part that I wanted to demonstrate at this point is the different frameworks that are applicable to the different levels of expertise. So as you can see, in terms of scaffolding for the different types of learning experiences, we do have the self-reflection that really guides teachers what to focus on and help with that sort of noticing what really matters in a classroom situation, instead of what I think as human beings we often just start focusing on the more superficial element, especially when we are not used to watching ourselves in classroom. Then we have developed the coaching pathways that go from skills coaching through dialogic and facilitative coaching, depending obviously on the level of expertise. So for example, the skills coaching is designed more to be applicable to the novice teachers, to the ECTs, and this is where the mentor or coach would be able to start one of these pathways, which then automatically creates that sort of private space between the coach or coachee or the mentor and ECT. And this is where we guide them through this sort of process and the structure, from reading the theory that they want to focus on, and again that can be on our platform or externally, review video examples. So there is the possibility both for the coach to provide modeling for the mentor or the mentor for the ECT, then encourage them to share how they've implemented that into their practice, then guide them through discussion and rehearsal of those skills, again as a cycle, implemented into the classroom practice and summarize it. So these sort of pathways are designed to help with the time element, actually, because it gives a tool for the mentor or the coach to take a coachee through a particular process that is kind of very focused and that really scaffolds what they need to do. So it's a sequence of interactions that they would like to go over a period of time. And what I'm showing you here now is one of the pathways that we've created, but as Andy pointed out, what is really valuable in what we provide is that we can adapt this and we can customize it. And my lovely colleague Anna at the back there is the key person who is working with schools in order to customize the pathways according to their needs. So what we have here is based on research and cognitive science, but each school has their own language, their own culture, their way of doing things, and this is why we are able to do that, both in terms of the types of interactions, but also the language that is being used. And the beauty of it is that the ready-made ones can be used as they are, and if there is a need or desire for customized ones, then Anna can do that very quickly and effectively. So one such example is the pathway that Anna created for one of our partner schools, Rosebery. So this particular one, they wanted to have that sort of scaffolding for their collaborative working over the terms in the year. So what they wanted to do is to have that sort of guidance, and they use Iris Connect as the CPD hub for what they're doing. starting from introduction, setting the clear goals, shared goals, with guidance for the administrator, obviously, of this private space where teachers who are participating are invited, and setting the scene with the sequence of events that will happen from starting with discussing the objectives and setting goals, through going through guided reflection in pairs, and then going through sharing the shared outcomes. So there are different ways of how this can happen, but typically it's about, together discussing and setting goals, and then going away to do those sorts of steps, record the practice, reflect. And this is where we provide specific guidance step by step for how to do the recording, how to do the reflection, with encouraging actually writing that down, because that really helps with consolidating the knowledge, planning and rehearsing it within, again, the way that they do it themselves, and capturing the actual practice, sharing it and refining it. So they have decided to do that in particular order, in particular terms, and this is then becoming really valuable professional development resource for the whole school, because what that provides is that sort of authenticity that we talked about, examples of real situations in the schools with real teachers. And what is valuable also here is that we are talking about real practice and not necessarily best practice, but sometimes the best learning happens when something didn't actually go very well, and having the courage to share that, to share that sort of vulnerability, that really helps with developing the culture of learning and support. And it's certainly something that is very evident in that school, and that is thriving. So going back to some of the, I think at the back there was one of the points that was made about enablers for effective collaborative professional development, and that is involving all of the teachers. And that is what we have seen in this example of the school, because it was done progressively, starting with encouraging those teachers who were more open to try new things, and then to disseminate. And we currently have really high percent, what is it, like 98% of teachers in the school actually involved in this and thriving. So we are really pleased to be able to do that. And there are more and more schools who are doing it. So this is something that has really transformed the way that we support schools. I mean, the tools that we provide, we have provided that for a long time, but these sort of scaffolds and the frameworks and the customization that really help to streamline the processes. And in addition to that, to be able to also see the progress that is being made. So what is also really, really useful for the leaders in an organization is when they're engaging with these sort of frameworks, they're able to see what topics the teachers are working on, which obviously would have been decided jointly, to what extent they have actually achieved them, what progress they're making, and obviously identifying points at which they would potentially want to offer more support, or to kind of identify where there are potentially bottlenecks, or where they want to see either bigger engagement or faster progression. Are there any questions around this? Those of you who are familiar with Iris Connect, have you had a chance to see these resources? Because what I'm showing you here is available to all of the users who have access to the platform. Right. Well, what I would like to spend some more time on right now is just talk a little bit more about lesson study as a particular method for collaborative professional development. And it's essentially a collaborative teacher enquiry model. So Lesson study is a model of professional development that involves collaborative lesson planning, implementation and analysis that goes into cycles in order to be able to see the results and make further improvements. And typically it involves 3 cycles, but it can be more. For those who are not aware, this particular model of professional development comes from Japan, originates in Japan and China, and that is since the late 19th century, so more than 150 years it's been used, and it is the most prevalent form of professional development that is apparently practiced in more than 90 schools in Japan. How much that has impact on the fact that they feature quite high on the PISA results, I don't know, it's debatable. I know that there are different views on that, but it's certainly that it's widely practiced in more than 50 countries in the world, and having had the opportunity to be part of the annual World Lesson Study Association conference a couple of months ago, which took place in the Netherlands, it was really inspiring to see educators from such diverse countries as Japan, China, USA, Kazakhstan, Netherlands, and some from the UK, and additional 30 other countries, to really be engaged with that and to be really enthusiastic about it. So in terms of the aim of the lesson study is really about teaching through monitoring pupils' learning in response to the different teaching methods. So in the UK, lesson study was introduced, I believe, back in 2001, and the guru of lesson study in the UK is Dr. Pete Dudley. He is a member of the University of Cambridge Faculty of Education. He has been president of the World Association of Lesson Study for 5 years, and is now actually CEO of CAMTRI, the Cambridge Teacher Research Exchange, which is their larger research program and a new global platform to enable practice research in education. So I would like you to hear from him, first of all, in terms of what lesson study is, before we go into showing what the process is and having a little exercise where we can try to simulate some of the activities that happen within that.
Lesson study is important now because so much research is showing that the kind of professional development which changes teachers' practice and makes a difference to teaching and learning has to have 3 ingredients. It needs to happen in classrooms, it needs to have teachers working collaboratively together and focusing on an inquiry. The teachers involved in the lesson study identify 3 or multiples of 3 pupils who represent different kinds of learner. They might be higher, middle, low retaining. They might be more outgoing, less outgoing, somewhere in between. But they all typify groups of learners within the class. The lesson is planned always with those children in mind, and the observation of those lessons always starts from their perspectives.
Case pupils are really, really important. In a whole class, it's sometimes easy to see the overview, but not actually focusing in on, particular students' learning. The case pupils that we've chosen are from a high ability, medium ability and low ability within the class. And that's really, really important on just getting the range of ability and seeing how the teaching process is affecting their learning.
Part of being involved in the study means that you undertake to share it with colleagues. In Japan, they will hold a public research lesson, invite people from the network and neighbouring schools and hold the lesson and have a discussion about it. What we're finding happens here is that people tend to capture the snippets on video and put together maybe a presentation and share it that way. Either way works really well. The important thing is that the actual practice is captured and disseminated.
I think the reflective time that you get with someone is the really useful bit. I mean, in terms of this lesson, I couldn't tell you what the majority of our target kids were doing because there's such hard work as a group and I have to really, really concentrate to keep them all on task. I can't individually think this is really working for him. So having Kat observe this and be able to actually give me these notes of what they were doing at each time is really helpful.
I've really seen pupils' abilities coming forward in their ability to assess each other, to look at their own work, to question whether or not they are communicating clearly, whether an argument is actually true or false.
It's been a win-win situation. Well, win-win-win really, because we've had pupils totally enthused about what's happening, we've had staff enthusing about things, and we've also had movement across a network.
At this point, I would like to also mention that lesson study has been evaluated in different studies, and its impact has been questioned in some of them. There was a impact evaluation by EEF a few years ago, which at the time found that there was little evidence that there was impact on learners. And it's important to acknowledge that. However, that evaluation was challenged in terms of the focus of it being more narrowly into what was considered to be just the first step in the lesson study. That actually, in order to see impact, it really needs to be used with the full version in terms of going through at least 3 cycles of lesson study analysis, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And I think it just brings us back to that sort of thing, the importance of the context and the conditions and the time for implementing that. Otherwise, obviously, there is a lot of benefit in research lessons from the perspective of, joint analysis, planning, observing, discussing together, but to get the results, it really needs to go through the full process, and that takes time. So some of the response to some of those skepticisms about lesson study is actually interestingly captured very well in this quote from Professor Akihiko Takahashi, very prominent persona in the Lesson Study Alliance, and he said at one of the conferences that if there is no impact on teaching and learning, then that intervention is not lesson study. So this is the lesson study process, and this particular one has been borrowed from Pete Dudley's material. So the premise is that teachers get together to plan their initial approach and to identify what they would like to focus on. They also then identify who is going to teach the lesson. So typically, the number of teachers involved in a lesson study team or lesson study group is recommended to be a minimum of 3, usually between 3 and 5. So after they initially plan a lesson with particular focus, one of them teaches it, the other ones observe either through video or in person. After the lesson, they interview the pupils in order to gain their feedback on it, and these are pupils that have been selected as case pupils, as Pete Dudley mentioned in the video. Then they have post research lesson discussion and initial plans for lessons, that research lesson 2. So the recommended cycle is to go through 3 cycles of those sort of activities, and then to write up and present what they have discovered. And in Japan, they often conduct a public research lesson where a lot of teachers from different schools are invited in order to take part in it and to hear the findings. So we have, of course, created a lesson study pathway. So I'm going to just go back to my pathways and show you that. And this is where I just wanted to show you briefly how we are enabling that sort of process and making it more efficient and effective. So the lesson study cycles have basically been translated into a pathway. And this is where we provide those sorts of initial instructions in terms of what to focus on, and these sort of collaborative spaces to encourage to capture the planning and the general discussion. to obviously part of the whole process is to do research on the theme that has been selected, and to study other research and the curriculum to develop the knowledge, to define a research question, then to plan, to identify the case pupils. As Pete Dudley said, it could be at the perceived level of knowledge that they need to have, or the support that they need to have, agree the learning focus, and identify teaching technique in order to do that. Then the next stage is to teach, and obviously for the other parts of the team to observe how that goes, and to note down the focus of the observation, and afterwards to note down the observations from that sort of lesson. And then afterwards, at the end of the process, the teachers come together and then they analyze, they discuss the research lesson and reflect on their own practice and belief, consider the feedback from the pupils, and prepare initial plan for the next research lessons. And there is a lot of material that is available that we have here, but also other lessons that the UK from Pete Dudley have provided in terms of how to structure those conversations and those sorts of planning stages. So these are types of the analysis notes that would be encouraged to be discussed. You know, ultimately what was observed and what needs to be changed next time in order to achieve the desired outcome. So I just wanted to briefly show you how we're doing with time. I think we have time. To have a little exercise, we have an example of mathematics lesson, and I have pointed out in this short clip 3 points at which we are identifying case pupils. So what I would like to encourage everyone is we're going to watch the video together, and it would be good to actually work in between 3 and 5 people in a group. So to have a good understanding and listening of the video, focus on the 3 case study pupils which I have identified, and you will see when they are talking, I have tagged the video so you know which ones I'm talking about, so that afterwards you can have a brief conversation about, based on what you have seen, what would be the next stage of planning. And I do appreciate that we're not doing this in the proper way. We haven't done the initial research and identification, but I'm just helping along with that. And then we will be able to capture all of that, and it can be done in the discussion forums that I showed in the pathway, but also there is a possibility to use the tools on our platform to really tag the video and point out the points where certain things are happening, basically to be used as evidence-based. And obviously the benefits of using video is because we have that artifact, and there is that sort of possibility to go and review and to see how progress has been made between the different cycles, because the objective of lesson study is to go through the 3 cycles, teaching the same sort of lesson, obviously with adaptation of the methodology. So let's give it a go. And when the case pupils that I've identified are speaking, the comments are going to be highlighted, so you'll be able to do that.
So here's a new one. Are you ready? True or false? Now remember, if you think it's true or if you think it's false, you want to have a really good reason. Okay? 80 divided by 4 is the same as 80 divided by 2 and 80 divided by 2. I want you to think carefully. 80 divided by 4, I could put a story problem around this. 80 Skittles divided by 4 kids. is the same amount as 80 Skittles divided by 2 kids plus 80 Skittles divided by 2 kids. And I think I'm going to have you turn and talk. Remember, you need to have a reason that you think the way you do. Go ahead.
I think it's false. Well,
what are you thinking?
What I was thinking was that 80 divided by 4 equals to 20 because 20 times 4 would equal to 80, and then 80 divided by 2 will equal to 40 because 40 plus 40 equals to 80, so 40 plus 40 equals 80 altogether.
So then what would the final equation read then?
20 is the same as 40.
You think it's true, huh?
So 20, you're saying that the final one would say what? 20 is the same as
40.
And 40 plus 40 is 20 the same as 80.
It's true because if you switch it around, 80 divided by 2 and then the other 2.
I'm going to skip to the case study pupils.
80 divided by 2 and then it will be 80 divided by 2 equals 80 divided by 4. And 2 plus 2 equals 4, and then the 80 stays where it is.
Okay. Romy, what are you thinking? You're agreeing.
I think it was true because me and Praise were talking, and all you have to do is add up the 2's, and 2 plus 2 is 4, so then it'll be the same thing.
Okay. Anybody else want to talk about true? Abdirsa?
I think it's true because you divided the Skittles into 2 days. Like the first day you gave 2 kids some, and the other day you gave the other kids some. Like 2 and 2 for 4. That equals 4. So it's actually 80 divided by 4 if you add them together, which you are because you said 80 divided by 2 plus 80 divided by 2, and that would equal 80 divided by 4.
Are you wanting to support true?
True.
Is there anyone else that wants to support true? Okay, so let's take some people who want to support false. Let's go Vivian, Akaya, and Andre. Go ahead, Vivian.
I think it's false because if you do 80 divided by 2, then you already splitted all the Skittles, so you can't do it again because all the Skittles are already gone. And you can't change the divisor, you can only change the dividend.
Right, I think we're going to stop there. It's fascinating. We have a few minutes time, and I would just like you to encourage to work in groups, maybe 3 to 5. And if you were a teacher that is taking part in this sort of lesson study, what would you pick out from these responses, and how would you contribute to what the next steps in the next lesson should be? Right, I'm being reminded we need to wrap up, and I don't want to hold you for any longer before lunch, but can we just have a couple of, from probably each table, some kind of initial thoughts? I believe that for most of you this would have been maybe kind of first, more in-depth exposure to what lesson study is all about. What did you think of it, and were you able to ascertain with what we've done so far what should be the next step? What was identified in the example of this lesson, and how would that inform what the next research lesson should be?
If I can summarise, I think what we found in very simple terms, there was an awful lot of misconception amongst the majority of students, but 2 out of the 3 students. Therefore, there needs to be some going back to this central premise of what is being taught and reteach.
Yeah, and obviously, one thing that is obvious, we only show a snippet, so we didn't know how it was taught. We just saw that sort of example. But yes, absolutely, and it is the majority. I mean, if we watch kind of the full video with the other tools that we have here in terms of capturing what is being recorded, in addition to having the time linked for the particular case pupils that I've selected in this example. I also time tagged other responses, and the majority of them actually did display the same sort of misconceptions. Can we have some feedback from the second table? Anything to add to this?
I was just going to say that one thing we picked up, there was quite a lot of, not with the case study students, essentially with this last chap here, I don't know if he's one of the case study students, but there's a lot of like passive learners, people who are not contributing much to the discussion, and so you don't know if they get it or not, and they might just be agreeing with the person who is confident enough to say something. So we were talking about strategies next time that might promote, no opting out from every member of the class. So RAC cards were mentioned, red and green cards, and any other strategy could we use whiteboards there as well, and stuff like that.
It's a good point. This is actually one of the things we discussed here. What are you focusing on? And it's not just the misconceptions, it's the teachers' actions, and can they do something different in order to either solicit responses from more people to have better understanding. And again, this is just a snippet. I think if we watch the whole lesson, that teacher is actually pretty impressive in terms of trying to do that, and the language that is being used to encourage students to share, even if they are not sure whether it's correct or not. Any kind of final thoughts from the front table?
I think there's a lesson. I think the example that she used was a strange example. I think it was completely counterintuitive to teach children about the idea of that inequality through to dividing 80 by 2. So I would be looking at what your examples are, what you're trying to get out of that example, because I think for me, it just confused me why she put 80 divided by 2 plus 80 divided by 2. It didn't seem to be addressing a misconception that a child would have. It seemed to be completely alien, if I've explained that.
Well, yeah.
Yes, you want an example that's an authentic misconception, not it felt invented, it felt almost shoehorned in.
Yeah, if I can add to that, just like from a constructivist way of looking at it, and having that scaffolding which has allowed them to reach this area, it's like we were talking about when you take away this of the scaffolding, or when do you reintroduce it, when do you actually then go back to things. So it's almost like how do you use feedback effectively within an environment like this in order to draw from previous knowledge to reinforce the lesson.
Yeah. And I think this actually really perfectly demonstrates the value of lesson study, because all the teachers will come to it from different perspectives, and the whole point is to kind of really collectively discuss that and find a way forward, because again the limitation here is that we just have a snippet, we don't know what happened before and after, and why that particular example was chosen. It was obvious that there were some misconceptions about it, so the way it was taught before probably obviously needs to be addressed. But what do you think about lesson study as a method? Do you see the value of it? Do you see that it's feasible to be implemented in our context, in our schools?
I think I might have missed the point here, but if you're focusing just on the outcomes of 3 students as representative of a class of 30, how do you make sure that just by focusing on them you don't get different reactions? Because if you are asking those questions, then the little bit in the red just completely switched off. So how do you overcome focusing on 3 rather than 30?
So the premise of focusing on 3 is to be actually very specific, because if you don't have particular focus, then it can be kind of generalizing what potentially the reaction of the students should be. So it's just to have very specific examples, and as it was explained in the definition, usually they should be collected from different levels of ability. What I've done here today is just simulations. So we haven't had the chance to explain why we would select particular students. But the premise is to be able to just, yes, I think that's sort of the level of ability, how they've reacted to that and yes, they could be or not representative of the rest of the students in the same level of ability, but it's considered to be more beneficial to focus on specific examples rather than general. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and if you'd like to speak more about it at any point, just feel free to find me. Yes.
You know, the session afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
do we come back to you for the symposium?
You have a choice, actually. You can go. I think the objective of the symposium is just to discuss some of the key themes that are emerging from the whole event. And if you are particularly interested in maybe discussing more in depth some of the things that we talked about, then feel free to come here. But if you would like to be, it's almost like an open panel discussion. If you would like to see what was happening in the other workshops, then you're free to go in whichever you want. Thank you very much for your attention.